Dragon, now brightened by the sun, will start to dim, and you'll start to see the docking lights as well as the navigation lights. Docking light will be white at the center of the spacecraft, and you'll see green and red lights on the forward bulkhead, green indicating the starboard position, red indicating the port position. The International Space Station cameras sometimes view from an upside down position, as you can see from this view, as the Earth is on the top left of your screen. So the port and starboard navigation light positions will be reversed, but it's because the camera is sort of upside down from the position of Earth.
Frozen? What's going on here?
Additionally, the cameras on board the International Space Station are subject to the radiation environment of the station. Now, the station itself does receive a certain amount of radiation, but also a certain amount of protection from the Earth's atmosphere. As we are in low Earth orbit, 250 miles from the Earth is not terribly far. There's still a decent amount of protection, but there is a higher radiation environment. When we enter into an orbital nighttime, some of the cameras, you'll start to see some pixels, different colors on the camera. As we enter into an orbital nighttime, those pixels and different colors become a little bit more apparent. Those are from the radiation environment, the radiation damaging the pixels inside the cameras themselves.
Okay, is it working now? I think it's working now.
Inside 3 minutes from waypoint 1 arrival, we do have a go to proceed past waypoint 1.
Hopefully you guys can hear me. I don't know. Hopefully this
So, Dragon, what you'll see is not a pause at waypoint 1, but it should proceed towards the keep out sphere. You'll notice some of the views change throughout our coverage here. The feeds coming from Dragon, you can see illuminating the International Space Station. Those feeds provided by ground
SpaceX
stations.
On the big loop. Approach 1 and soft capture ring extension will begin shortly. Dragon will continue its approach to waypoint 2.
SpaceX, Dragon, copy all.
And that relayed from the SpaceX core in Hawthorne, California, confirmed by the crew aboard Endurance. We are proceeding inside the keep out sphere. You are seeing the docking light begin to blink at the center of Dragon Endurance. Features of Dragon becoming a little bit more apparent. The nose cone fully open, exposing the docking ring and the forward bulk of the Dracos. You did hear that Dragon will extend the soft docking ring mechanism. This allows for a cushioned contact as Dragon makes its way toward the International Docking Adapter. Docking comes in several phases, which includes contact and a soft capture, which is initiated by the docking ring. That docking ring is retracted to pull Dragon in closer to the International Space Station, and then begin a sequence to hard dock Dragon to the International Space Station. There are 12 hooks that are driven to really latch Dragon to the International Space Station. They're deployed in 2 sets of 6. And those will be confirmed by the crew. Once all of the hooks are driven, there is also an umbilical that extends and connects to an interface on the International Space Station side to provide power and data transfer between the 2 vehicles. Dragon right now operating on battery power and solar power that's generated from the trunk. Once Dragon attaches to the International Space Station, it'll be receiving power from the International Space Station through the duration of its stay aboard. We did hear confirmation that Dragon is passing waypoint 1. So we're now moving inside the docking axis and towards the keep out sphere. Now passing waypoint 1, Dragon Endurance heading towards the International Space Station. We're following along from here inside Mission Control Houston, working jointly with the teams in Hawthorne, California, to take us through the next series of steps, including crossing the Keep Out Sphere and heading towards waypoint 2. Let's send it back over to Anna and Chris in Hawthorne.
And thanks, Gary. Yeah, so we have passed waypoint 1, so waypoint 2 is what is up next, and that will put Dragon only about 20 meters.
Station Houston, on the big loop, monitor approach per step 3 of 1.102, Dragon approach and retreat monitoring. Let us know when your review is complete and you are ready for docking.
You heard that.
Station copies on the big loop, step 3, and I can confirm that review is complete and we're ready for docking.
I wonder how comfortable it is in the.
So that call there between the ISS flight control room and the crew on board the International Space Station.
Houston copies. At waypoint 2, Dragon will hold for approximately 5 minutes.
And you heard that call there indicating that the ISS
Thanks for the heads up.
and the crew there are now ready for Dragon's docking to the forward docking adapter of the Harmony module of the International Space Station. Dragon approaching waypoint 2, which is the point about 20 meters from the International Space Station's forward docking adapter. And as we did just hear there, we are expecting Dragon to hold for about 5 minutes once it reaches that point. It crossed through waypoint 1 and waypoint 0 without having to hold. But again, these waypoints or checkpoints are places we can hold if we need to, and if we don't, we can proceed forward through them.
And so we have gone through 2 of those waypoints, so waypoint 0 and 1,
wonder if they're
and
gonna
so
let
that
us
Dragon
see
is less than 200 meters away from the International Space
them
Station,
get
about
connected to
170
the
meters
space
currently, away from its target of that forward node 2 forward docking port. And there you're seeing a great view on your screen of the Dragon Endurance spacecraft as
Doesn't
it
even
makes
look like
its
moving.
final approach to the International Space Station. The teams in Mission Control Houston and the teams at the International Space, or not the International Space Station, the SpaceX Mission Control teams behind us are, of course, doing some final go, no-go polls for docking. It's one of the final checkpoints between
Damn,
those
look at these
teams to
computers.
make sure everyone is good to proceed and to dock. We did hear that there will likely be a brief hold at waypoint 2. And again, that waypoint 2 is just 20 meters away from the International Space Station, so very close at that point. So they will hold briefly, and then from there, we will have our final approach and docking. We will have an
pretty close.
initial
This is
soft
pretty close.
capture. We did hear that the soft capture ring was being extended a few minutes ago. And then from there, they will begin to deploy
what the
those
hell is
hooks,
that?
2 sets of 6 for a total of 12 hooks to get that hard capture.
What the hell
And
is that
during
right
that
there?
final hold, that again, we're
you guys
expecting
see
around
that?
the waypoint 2 mark, which is 20 meters away from the space station. During that final hold, they can possibly wait for better lighting conditions.
Something in
So
space
the
is
space
moving
station does
really
have exterior
fast.
lights, and Dragon can dock in the dark. But of course, we go through an orbit every 90 minutes. So there's a sunrise and sunset every 45 minutes. So if they need
It
to
went
wait for a
straight
little
up.
bit of improvement in the lighting conditions, they can use that waypoint 2 hold opportunity to wait for things like that,
Aliens.
ensure final
Aliens.
alignment, ensure everyone
Aliens.
is good to go for that final approach and docking.
And as we could see right there, right before we switch to the inside view
is
there,
supposedly live.
that's a great view on the outside. You can see that we're passing into an orbital sunset here, so approaching orbital night. And you can see how that lighting is very different on board the International Space Station. But what I love about that view, too, is you can see the forward navigation strobe light from Dragon illuminating the forward element of the International Space Station where it will be docking just a few minutes from now. But of course, approaching waypoint 20.
I hope we get
This
to
is
see
a view
it.
now from the International Space Station looking at Dragon. You can see the white navigation light indicating the center of the docking alignment axis there. And the green light that you see is the starboard navigation light. So just helping the folks on the International Space Station keep track of Dragon's orientation there. And the red one that just came into view is for the port side orientation. And I really love this too as we get into orbital night as we're approaching the space station, because we're probably going to see Dragon's Draco thrusters pulsing, and that's always a sight to behold in orbital night.
And so Dragon and the International Space
Soft
Station
capture ring extension complete.
We're not gonna be able to see it. Why they turn off all
And we
the
just heard
lights?
confirmation that that soft capture ring extension has been fully completed. So that extension of the soft capture ring, it's fully out and ready for that soft capture, that initial contact with the International Space Station. So right now, the International Space Station and Dragon are currently flying over Canada. And they're continuing
Canada.
to make its final approach to the International Space Station, currently just over 100 meters away as it makes its way to that waypoint 2, which is 20 meters away. So a little over 80 meters to go to the international, or to that waypoint 2. And then that final initial capture, and then we'll have the hooks deploy and have that hard capture milestone.
Now, as you're looking there at the SpaceX Mission Control here in Hawthorne, California, where we are, Dragon up on orbit as it is approaching waypoint 2 on that docking axis for the forward docking adapter. It's approaching the space station very, very slowly, about a few tenths of a meter per second. And it's also trying to keep in proper alignment with that docking port. But again, waypoint 2 is where we're going to stop based on the calls, and we can do some final alignments there and final checkouts. But so far so good for Dragon. About 28 hours after liftoff now, after lifting off from the Kennedy Space Center yesterday afternoon at 7:03 p.m., completing the docking in just a few minutes from now.
And so Dragon is now less than 100 meters away from the International Space Station as it continues to make that final approach. And so right now we're seeing those live views of the SpaceX Mission Control team here in Hawthorne, California. And typically we'll go back to these views when we do have those brief loss of signal between the International Space Station and Dragon and the ground. And we'll regain those views shortly. It's just a handover between satellites. So that tracking and data relay satellite system that the International Space Station relies on.
They want to make sure it's
a
safe.
brief handover period between satellites, which causes a loss of those views
They wanna make sure
periodically
it's
throughout
safe.
our coverage.
Makes sense.
Kind of like going from cell phone tower to cell phone tower.
And so the
They're not gonna show
let's see,
us.
Dragon is less than 80 meters away, so continuing to approach waypoint 2, about 60 meters to go until it reaches waypoint 2. Again, we are expecting Dragon to hold at waypoint 2 for just a few minutes to ensure final alignment, to ensure lighting conditions are good before we have that final docking. We are expecting that docking
wonder
to
how
take
it
place
docks.
around 9 a.m. Pacific, a little bit later than that.
Wait, what?
And right before that final docking takes place, we will hear that call for chop that we mentioned previously, which is the crew hands-off point. So right before right after you hear that call is typically when that soft capture takes place.
And that chop call that we've been talking about, and basically what that means is the crew can no longer manually abort Dragon away from the International Space Station if there should be a reason to do so. It would all be based on Dragon's automation at that point. Everything going very well for Dragon as it continues to approach the space station. The crew monitoring the automated approach for the vehicle, as well as any escape options they might have to do. But again, not expecting to have to use those.
Station Houston, on the big loop, the no exercise constraint for docking begins now.
Station copies.
And so you did just hear a call up from the Capcom, or capsule communicator at Mission Control in Houston, to the crew on the International Space Station, mentioning that the exercise constraint has started. So typically when you have visiting vehicles such as Dragon arriving and departing the International Space Station, there are constraints on crew exercise, and that's basically to prevent additional loads from being imparted on the station during these dynamic operations.
Wait, what?
And I love this sort of night vision-esque view here from Dragon looking at the International Space Station. So this is a view from the Dragon Endurance carrying the Crew 10 crew. The forward docking port there is in the center of your screen, sort of being illuminated every few seconds by that light from Dragon. And what I love about this is you can see the Crew 9 Dragon directly
this look
above
like the
that
movies
docking
almost.
port.
It's like the movies.
And of course, Crew 9 going to be coming home after a brief handover
This
period
is
with the Crew
crazy.
10 crew. And then inside of Dragon Endurance here, you have Commander Ann McLean on the left-hand side of your screen, pilot Nicole Ayers on the right. Next to Nicole is Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov, and on
So I think there's
Ann's
5 of them.
left is JAXA, or Japanese Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi. Ann and Takuya
More boxes,
Oh my
more
God.
options. Grainger has over 1,700 box types in stock, and ready.
And Nicole and Kirill are on their first missions to
live
space.
So it's getting pretty real for the 4 crew members that make up Crew 10. Right now, they are just under 25 meters away from the International Space
25
Station,
meters.
so just outside of that
25 meters.
waypoint 2, which is that point at which Dragon will hold for a few minutes.
On the big loop, you see we're approaching waypoint 2. Crew visors are closed.
Copy. Crew 10 visors are closed.
I should have tagged.
We did just hear that confirmation that the crew is approaching waypoint 2, so they see that on those screens in front of them. They see the distance, and they're able to monitor that approach as well.
And this is great because you can see Dragon's Draco thrusters firing here. You've got the red and the green navigation lights as well as the white one, but all those little flashes and pulses that you're seeing around the vehicle are the thrusters, keeping that alignment as we continue to approach waypoint 2, 20 meters from the ISS, where again
Why is
we
that
are
blinking?
expecting to
That's
hold
not
for a
blinking
few minutes
anymore.
up. And you can see we're really getting close,
Time delay?
considering now we're really illuminating that forward docking
Time delay.
port with Dragon.
So that's faster. This
And
camera-
so Dragon
camera on the
is
left
actually
faster.
at that waypoint 2 mark now, just around 20 meters away, so we will have that hold briefly. And recently, the team in Mission Control Houston did conduct their final go, no-go
So
pull as well
Dragon
for docking.
SpaceX on the big loop. Dragon is holding at waypoint 2 for Dragon Eye assessment.
Does this guy even know what he's pressing?
You hear that confirmation.
Dragon, copy.
And you hear that confirmation that Dragon is holding. Now you're on the left-hand side of your screen as you're looking from the ISS's camera out at Dragon. Even though we've said Dragon is holding, you're still going to see some of those thruster pulses because holding in space is not like just stopping your car that holds the same position.
And Dragon SpaceX on the big loop. Ground is bold go and will be enabling approach shortly. Confirm crew readiness for final approach.
I don't even know what the hell. I'm
SpaceX
looking at.
Dragon, Crew 10 is ready for final approach.
Is that supposed to open up?
And that is great words there to hear from SpaceX Mission Control.
Resume has been commanded. Reminder, once Dragon is inside the crew hands-off point, retreat and breakout are not permitted.
Copy.
And Anna, here we go.
So we did just hear that they have the go to resume final approach, so that we had that brief hold completed at waypoint 2, which was just 20 meters away from the International Space Station. So Dragon will now resume its final approach and finish its fly into the International Space Station's
What?
Node 2 forward
Did
docking
you guys see
port.
that? He just flipped.
And we heard
he just
Dragon
flipped
has
the
been
other
approached
person off.
your good confirmation of
Did you guys see
Dragon
that?
in
Oh my
that
God, that's
approach
hilarious.
2 mode, meaning it has passed waypoint 2 and is coming into the station. Again, you can see
Station Houston on the big loop. Dragon is on final approach and is go for docking. Monitor
got
for steps
recorded.
5 and 6 in 1.102 Dragon approach and retreat monitoring.
You know you're gonna cut that out in their videos.
And that was the call from the International Space Station Flight Control Room to the crew on the ISS. Again, just everyone confirming, making sure everyone's on the same page as Dragon is now very close to docking with the International Space Station here today.
And so Dragon is now just 17 meters away from the International Space Station and continuing to close in on its target. Coming up here shortly, we will likely hear that call out for CHOP, which stands for Crew Hands Off Point. That typically takes place less than 30 seconds before docking. So as soon as you hear that, you know that that docking will take place very soon after. And then at that point, when we hear the CHOP call out, any aborts will have to be done automatically by Dragon. And so also on the International Space Station, we have NASA astronaut Nick Hague monitoring this final approach. And then once Dragon is docked, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore will walk through those hatch preparation and opening steps to welcome the crew on board. And Dragon is now less than 14 meters away from the International Space Station and continuing that final approach.
What is all that? Is that all wires? Like
These very delicate series of maneuvers now. Dragon approaching very, very slowly relative to the International Space Station. Again, we talked earlier that launch is all about accelerating the vehicles to orbital velocity. And even though both Dragon and the ISS are traveling at about 17,500 miles per hour or 27,500 kilometers per hour, they are moving very, very slow, like 1/10 of a meter per second in relation to each other right now.
Dragon now at about 10 meters away from the International Space Station. we're standing by for that call out for CHOP here shortly.
SpaceX Dragon, 10 meters.
10 meters.
Copy, 10.
And again, you're looking at the forward docking port of the International Space Station, which is mounted to the Harmony or Node 2 module of the space station. The Crew 9 Dragon, which has been there since September, is also attached to a docking port on this module. And that Dragon is actually just off the top of your screen there as Crew 10's Dragon comes in for docking in just a few moments. And I love these views again. You've got the Dragon, you've got the ISS staring at Dragon on the left-hand side of your screen, and you've got Dragon looking at its docking port on the ISS on the right.
That's so cool.
And Dragon is now less than 7 meters away from the International Space Station as it continues to make that final approach.
So wait, I'm confused.
Traveling with a range rate of less than 0.082, which, as you mentioned earlier, it continues to get slower and slower as we make this final approach.
Yeah, you gotta be careful what is in.
It's at 5 meters.
This is so crazy,
Copy,
guys.
5 meters.
Oh my god.
So the next call we should hear is CHOP, or that crew hands-off period,
Uh-oh, there's a
followed
light.
moments later by docking.
That typically comes at about 2 meters away from the International Space Station. Right now, we're less than 4 meters away.
What happened?
Less than 3 meters away.
It's at 2 meters. Clear handoff.
2 meters.
Copy, hands off.
I think they lost connection with the
There
other
is the
camera.
CHOP call.
Standing by for initial contact of Dragon to the International Space Station.
Oh shit, does that have to connect to this thing? Oh my god. How the hell? That's too fast. You gotta slow down. Are they going too fast? Oh shit.
Dragon contact and soft capture complete.
Soft capture complete.
And there you heard Dragon has successfully docked to the International Space Station. We have contact and soft capture confirmed.
What does that
Soft
mean?
capture meaning that the initial soft capture ring around Dragon has physically connected with the international docking adapter. And this is just the first part of the overall docking sequence, Anna.
And so we did have that contact confirmed at 9:04 p.m. Pacific, 11:04 p.m. Central, while both Dragon and the International Space Station were flying 260 stat sheet
Soft
miles.
capture ring retraction in progress.
Flying 260 stat sheet miles over the Atlantic Ocean, and we did just hear confirmation that that soft capture ring is now beginning to retract. So they're beginning those steps to firmly attach Dragon to the International Space Station so that we can have what is known as a hard capture.
And again, as we mentioned earlier, like all the timings of these events are a little nebulous and they can change around by a couple of minutes here. So while we were expecting completion of we're expecting the completion of soft capture ring retraction, which we heard was already underway in just a few minutes. That will be followed by the start of the hard capture sequence, which is a series of 12 hooks that are separated into 2 batches of 6 that drive between Dragon and the International Space Station to really hard connect them together. And then after we have that, we have a whole bunch of other things that sort of come into place at that point once Dragon is securely on the Harmony module of the ISS. Once those soft capture systems retract, the spacecraft will we're getting closer for the hard capture. And then and that's about a 15-minute process.
And so once those hooks are fully driven, so those 2 sets of 6 hooks for a total of 12, then we will see those umbilicals deploy. And again, that helps to hardline the data and power from the International Space Station to Dragon. And then the crew on the International Space Station, as well as Dragon, will get ready for the hatch opening operation. So they will have to pressurize the vestibule. Again, that is that space between the Dragon hatch and the Space Station hatch that was previously exposed to the vacuum of space prior to this docking. Again, we had that docking initial capture at 9:04 p.m. Pacific. So they will work to pressurize that space. perform a series of leak checks, and then once everything is good and they get the go-ahead, they will open those hatches. Again, there's the hatch on Dragon that has to be open, as well as the station hatch, to then bring
the
crew tent onto the International Space Station. And there you're actually getting a live view from the International Space Station, looking at the station hatch that will have to be opened before you can get to the Dragon hatch and bring the crew on board. And they will be welcomed by the Expedition 72 crew, and they will have a brief welcoming ceremony, and then they will go into a safety briefing and get up to speed and adjust to life on station, again completing that handover period with the Crew 9 crew before Crew 9 returns home.
Damn, look at all the tools
Then
right
they
there.
get to work. Because as exciting as the last 28 hours have been from launch until docking, this is just the beginning of a multi-month mission for Crew 10. They're joining the Expedition 72 crew, which has been ongoing for the last few months aboard the International Space Station. And about a month from now, when a Soyuz crew rotation from Russia completes, that will actually mark the start of Expedition 73, which our Crew 10 crew will be joining. And of course, there are about 200 science experiments that the crew will be performing over the course of their multi-month mission up there. And I can't wait to see it and everything that they're going to be able to do up there.
So they will be contributing to about 200 different experiments and technology demonstrations from human research. They're doing some flammability studies.
Ring retraction complete. Docking sequence is holding for MCS reconfiguration.
And we did just hear confirmation that the soft capture ring has been fully retracted. So again, that soft capture that happened with the initial contact about 4 minutes ago at 9:04 p.m. Pacific, 11:04 p.m. Central, as the International Space Station and Dragon were flying over the Atlantic Ocean. They are going to hold that docking's hard capture sequence a little bit to make some final configurations. We do expect that full hard capture process to take about 15 minutes, so we have about 10 or so more minutes to go there. The next step in that process will be to begin to deploy those hooks. Again, there are 12 total hooks that have to fully engage and really bring Dragon in for a nice hard seal to the International Space Station's forward docking port.
Seal.
And sort of like a lot of things with spaceflight, docking is not just a singular instantaneous event when the two vehicles actually meet and connect with one another. There's the soft capture, which we're through with Dragon right now. There's also, like the vehicles are moving in relation to one another at docking, so they've also got to make sure that any motion between them is dampened out and that they are really ready for that hard capture connection.
And there you're seeing a live view on your screen on the right-hand side. That's a view from the International Space Station of the Dragon spacecraft Endurance, now docked to the International Space Station's Node 2 forward docking port. And again, that docking took place at 9:04 p.m. following an approximately 28-hour journey.
Station Houston, on the big loop, MCS configured, proceeding with hook driving.
Hook driving, okay.
Station copies.
And there we hear good confirmation that what we were waiting for there and holding the docking sequence has been, we've gotten through that, and now we are going to begin that hard capture sequence, and that's what you were talking about, Anna, driving the series of 12 hooks, 6 at a time, to form that hard capture. And again, we expect that process to take about 15 minutes, but it really is great to see the Dragon Endurance back on the space station. Its 4th trip to space. This particular capsule has launched the Crew 3, Crew 5, and Crew 7 missions, and of course returned those astronauts safely to Earth. And now it's doing it again for the 4th time for the Crew 10.
And it's the 10th total rotational mission for SpaceX flying crew to the International Space Station. Again, we did hear confirmation that the first set of 6 hooks for a total of 12 is now driving. So those will make a hard capture, and then they will drive the second set of 6 hooks.
She's good at math.
And then from there, we will have confirmation of that hard capture, and then they will deploy some umbilicals and then begin that pressurization and leak check series before we have hatch opening and welcoming Crew 10 on board the International Space Station. Of course, it's been a pretty long journey for Crew 10. They've been traveling for over 28 hours now following a lift liftoff
why did they put
yesterday of
cameras
7:03
inside
p.m.
so we could see
Eastern,
what they're doing?
4:03 p.m.
they
Pacific from
showing
NASA's
that?
Kennedy Space Center in Florida, Launch Complex 39A. They had
Only showed us
approximately
the
9-minute ride to orbit before we had that orbital insertion and second engine cutoff, and then they've been traveling in free flight since then. They had a series of burns that set them up for a docking today at 9:04 p.m. Pacific. They first had their phase burn, and that was completed yesterday at 4:52 p.m. Pacific, followed by a boost burn at 12:08 p.m. Pacific, a close burn a little bit after that at 12:50 p.m. And then they had a mid-course out-of-plane burn, a transfer burn, co-elliptic burn, and just recently we had that approach initiation burn. So a lot of burns to set them up and get them on a track to where they are now at the International Space Station.
And after that sequence of burns, it went pretty good after that point. We saw Dragon cruise through the waypoint 1 and waypoint 0 targets of 400 and 220 meters respectively from the International Space Station, and then close into that waypoint 2 were a brief hold and then right on in for a picture perfect docking over the North Atlantic.
And so we did have that soft capture at 9:04. Now the first set of 6 hooks has fully closed, and now the second set of 6 hooks is driving. Once that second and final set of hooks finishes closing and driving, we will have that hard capture complete. And then from there, they will, of course, begin the pressurization process of the vestibule.
And of course, part of Crew 10's arrival at the space station means that it's time for another crew who's been up there for a few months to come on home. So a few days after Crew 10, now that Crew 10 has docked, in a few days we will have the planned undocking and return of Crew 9, which includes NASA astronauts Nick Hague, Butch Wilmore, and Sunita Williams, as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut Alexander Gorbanov. 2 of them have been up there since September. Nick and Alexander launched on Crew 9 in September on the Crew 9 mission from Slick 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station. And of course, Butch and Sunny were already on the space station and joined Crew 9 and will now be coming home on Dragon.
So they will do that brief handover period. The handover period between crews is pretty typical. We like to ensure a continuous presence of U.S. crew, and then the Crew 9 will help bring Crew 10 up to speed as the new arrivals and get them adjusted to space station life before they return home. And so that second set of 6 hooks continues to drive. We had that initial docking about 10 minutes ago at 9:04 p.m. Pacific, and typically it takes about 15 minutes to have hard capture complete, so we should be approaching that milestone here shortly.
And as all of that is happening and those umbilicals are being connected,
hard capture complete.
There we go. 15 minutes.
And there we heard confirmation that we do have hard capture, so all 12 hooks have finished driving. And then from there, the umbilicals will start to deploy. And that, again, brings that hardline data and power from the International Space Station to Dragon. And then the pressurization of the vestibule will begin. And again, NASA astronaut Butch Wilmore on the International Space Station side is on tap to be to help with those hatch opening operations today. Again, we are expecting hatch opening about an hour and a half or so after or from now, and then from there will be a welcoming combined with the farewell remarks of Crew 10.
An hour? I can't wait an hour.
That handover
Sorry, guys.
is pretty short, and then from there they will adjust to station life. There will be a safety briefing, and then they'll get right into it as Expedition 72 members for the next month before they become Expedition 73.
And when you can see that's Sunny Williams there in front of the hatch on the International Space Station side. So we did hear confirmation of hard capture is complete. The docking sequence still proceeding, though, with Dragon. You mentioned those umbilicals that are now being driven between the vehicles to establish good power and data connections between the International Space Station and Dragon. Now, we've talked a little bit about what the folks on the ISS side are doing here, getting those hatches ready. And inside Dragon, they're continuing to monitor the docking sequence as it progresses, and then they'll also be able to get out of their suits as well that they have been in for the last couple of hours as Dragon has approached the International Space Station.
And I
so
caught
as
it on this
Dragon
live
crew
stream,
gets out of their suits, of course, as we mentioned previously, NASA's astronaut Butch Wilmore is going to start those hatch opening operations.
Holy
And there on your screen, you are seeing NASA astronaut Nick Hague as well as Roscosmos cosmonaut.
Wow, look where his feet
Keenan,
is.
as
That's
they
crazy.
stand by to greet Crew 10 members and welcome them as part of the International Space Station crew.
Like
Again,
little,
they are going to get
feet-
that
seat
pressurization
belts, or
process
feet
underway here
belts.
shortly, and they will
Feet
pressurize that
belts.
area known as the vestibule, which is the area between the Dragon hatch and the station hatch that was previously exposed to the vacuum of space. And then once that happens,
They're probably so freaking excited.
they will
Oh
conduct
my
a series
God.
of leak checks. And there on your screen, you just saw NASA astronaut Sunny Williams actually floating right in front of that hatch that will be open in just a little bit.
Oh wait, so it is going to open in a little bit. She said an hour.
Dragon, SpaceX on the big loop. Docking sequence complete. Ground will be enabling hardline power and comm connections shortly. You are go to doff suits per procedure 4.012. Crew 10, welcome aboard the International Space Station.
Who's talking?
SpaceX Houston and ISS, this is Dragon Mission Specialist Takuya Onishi on the big loop. We copy the docking sequence is complete. We are go for 4.012 for docking suits. And on behalf of the entire crew, I would like to thank all the partners, especially our SpaceX friends who trained us and enabled us to safely arrive at the International Space Station. It was so amazing to see the ISS shining in the darkness of space and symbolizing human beings, technology, and international cooperation. And it's such a great honor for us to be part of this program. We have a lot of exciting work ahead of us that we are looking forward to. Again, thank you very much to everybody who helps us to get here.
And there you just heard some really nice words between Crew 10 as they have now arrived at the International Space Station. We do have that confirmation of hard capture complete. Again, those words were coming from JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi, who is serving as one of the mission specialists for Crew 10. And so now with Dragon successfully and safely docked.
And Houston copies all. Welcome to the International Space Station, Crew 10. We look forward to your work and the spirit of cooperation with which you've arrived.
Thank you very much, Dennis.
And there's some words from the capsule communicator, Capcom in Houston, in the International Space Station Flight Control Room. Back to Crew 10, and again, now with Dragon docked, that's going to wrap us up for our coverage here in Hawthorne, but our coverage for Crew 10 won't stop there.
That's correct. It's great to see the Dragon Endurance docked back at the station and see Crew 10 ready to begin their multi-month mission in there.
All right, guys.
In a minute, we're going to toss it back to Gary in Mission Control Houston to take us through the vestibule depressurization hatch opening, and then we'll see NASA astronauts Anne McLean and Nicole Ayers, along with JAXA, or Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency astronaut Takuya Onishi and Roscosmos cosmonaut Kirill Peskov float into the International Space Station. But first, let's do a quick recap of how we got here.
It's going to be an hour. I can't wait an hour. I can't wait that long. Sorry, guys. Hope you guys enjoyed watching this video with me. You get to see some alien that I pointed out in space while it was trying to dock. You can rewind it, and I'm pretty sure you can rewind this and see it. And then I saw an astronaut flipping off another astronaut. That was hilarious. And yeah, hope you guys liked the video. Comment, subscribe. I'd appreciate it. Peace out, everybody.